Yes, she was dying, laying down, and I was like, this is the time. It's going to happen. Do you think this could be Netflix's Game of Thrones?
No.
I don't think so.
I don't think so. Sorry, Netflix. Try again. Keep going.
Let's chat about science, because I love science. Hello and welcome to Road Goes Ever On and On. Today, guest host Dawn and I are talking about the hit Netflix TV show, Three Body Problem, based off of the science fiction book of the same name. We're talking about episodes 1 and 2, so spoilers are ahead. If this is your first time watching the channel, then thank you so much for joining. If you enjoy watching breakdowns of episodes of TV, then feel free to subscribe, hit the bell icon for notification, give the video a thumbs up if you're enjoying it. If you are coming back, thank you so much, but more importantly, if you're wondering where Mark is, he's just on a 2-week vacation, so Dawn is filling in the meantime. Once again, thank you for joining us. And with that, let's go ahead and jump into this. I thought we would start off kind of with overall impressions. So we're 2 episodes into an 8-episode show.
Right.
What are your overall thoughts? You have not read the books.
I have not read the book, and you have.
I've read 1 of the 3 books, and I've started the 2nd of the 3 books.
And I've read none of them. Overall...
Also, you're not necessarily as big sci-fi fan as I am.
Correct.
Definitely not a science nerd.
Correct.
So different perspectives.
Correct.
Okay, continue.
Overall, I like the show. Much like the other videos that you and Mark do in the shows that we watch, because I do watch them with you. I am more invested in the relationships of the characters more than the science. Like, I will accept the science as is, as part of the book. Like, I don't know if it's real. I don't know if it's not real. I accept it as part of the drama or the storytelling or whatever.
I think that kind of gets to one of the big differences. I think that you are probably somebody that will enjoy the show and not necessarily the books, because the books, the characters are paper thin. The story and the science and like how, I don't want to get too much into any kind of like spoiler territory, but as far as what is going on and the kind of like science it is based off of is definitely the forefront. The characters aren't so much. So they've really kind of like fleshed out the characters.
Yeah.
And so I don't necessarily recommend the books to you.
Right.
After you said that.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. Like, I'm definitely more invested in the drama and the characters and how they intertwine and, you know, the relationships they have with each other and their interactions than...
There's so many more interactions in this than in the books. Like, we don't see all of these interesting characteristics of, like, you know, this person likes this person, or this person has this kind of like backstory. It's,
right.
It very, very different. So that is definitely interesting hearing. What are your thoughts of the fact that this is coming from the same people that made Game of Thrones? Like, does that change expectations?
You know, like, it took me a while to get into Game of Thrones. I had to literally be sick, like, couldn't move, and it was like I couldn't get off the couch. So I stayed home from work, and so he put it on the TV, took the remote, and left for work. So it was...
Yes, she was dying, laying down, and I was like, this is the time. It's going to happen. Because I think we maybe started it, and there's an animal death early on, and that's a huge no-no. It's like harm to animals. Plus, it was like, it is slow in the beginning. Yes. There's a lot of like characters.
There's just a lot of characters. It was just funny because I do like the characters in the drama, but it was just like there was too many to keep track of.
Yes.
And so Game of Thrones took a while, but then when I was in it, So
like, how does that potentially change your expectations, especially early in, so you don't know if they're gonna nail it or not?
I don't know if they're gonna nail it. Kind of knowing that it's a trilogy, right? Mm-hmm. So there is like, it's not gonna. I don't have the same expectations for story lengths per se as it is Game of Thrones.
The last book is a lot longer than the others, so it's very possible that it ends up being 4 seasons instead of. I think 3 to 4 is likely. They either like trim it to like what's essential, or they try and hit all of it and they do like 4 seasons.
But overall, I don't have that same expectation I guess, that I
Mhm.
do for Game of Thrones. This is a very different type of book than the Game of Thrones books, coming from a very different culture.
Game of Thrones is like fantasy. Actually, I think that Game of Thrones is almost historical fiction
Okay.
that has magic thrown in. Like it doesn't have, dwarves and goblins, and yes,
Right.
it has dragons, barely.
Right.
Like it has magic barely.
Okay.
It really draws so much from medieval history. It almost feels more like historical fiction that just happens to have.
But this series is written.
This is science.
But this is also written by a Chinese author.
Mm-hmm.
Like from their cultural viewpoint, like it's
Yeah.
just a very different feeling book or like
Yeah.
story
Yeah,
for
yeah.
me. So comparing them isn't really something that I'm looking at.
Do you
I know
think that
that
Netflix was hoping that this would be their Game of Thrones? I know that they have
course,
big stuff like, Stranger Things, they've had like House of Cards, but I don't think they've had a Game of Thrones. I don't know if anybody's had a Game of Thrones.
I was just gonna say, I don't think anybody.
Everybody wants a Game of Thrones. Like
Right.
Jeff Bezos wanted Game of Thrones when he did I know you didn't watch it, but the Lord of the Rings one.
Right.
He was like, that's the most expensive television show ever made.
Yeah.
He was like, I have all the money. If I give you all the money,
Will you
make
make
me
it?
a Game of Thrones. I don't think that was.
I think Game of Thrones was unique in its timing of like when it came out and just I don't know.
Based off of 2 episodes, do you think this could be Netflix's Game of Thrones, or
No,
I don't think so.
I don't think so.
Yeah, I definitely don't think so.
Sorry, Netflix. Try again. Keep going.
I thought it was interesting, like going kind of with the overall impressions. Like, did you think it was slow pacing? Did you feel like you were like thrown in? Like
I actually felt it was fine. I didn't think they didn't do a lot of character develop before something happened. Like from the get go, like you kind of see that this has been happening, and then it immediately affects the characters that you're kind of invested in, that you're meeting, and like you can tell that are going to be like the core group of characters.
Yeah.
So I don't think that it took a lot to get there, which some series do take a lot of setup. Like this is who this is, this is who this is where they're from. They did some like past shots, which I know we'll get to later, but like that kind of was enough to like set the scene. I think so. I don't think it was too slow to start. I think it was actually pretty on par. In the first episode, you get something. Like you get
in the first scene, you get something like that. I think that's
something.
A pretty impactful scene, and even the second scene opens up right to like that suicide
the
shot of the crime scene.
Right.
That's pretty dramatic. And then I think even the scene after that, when I don't know if that's like the third scene, but when the other scientist takes their life.
Right.
Like I feel like the stakes of this show
say
that they've definitely set high stakes right off the bat.
Yes.
Versus Game of Thrones, it took a while for you to meet everybody before they
Right.
move things into place before you finally see oh crap, the stakes are big.
Well, no, that's not true, because that guy that sees the White Walker and abandons the wall first episode is beheaded by Ned Stark in the first episode. So there is a
he's like a minor character, and
yes,
it's like,
but it's
and
like people will die, and
people
will die.
Yeah, but it's not anybody you know, and
No.
it's like
I think the first invested stake you have in that is maybe when they push what's his face
Bran out the window.
Yeah.
Yes, but even then, that's not necessarily big stakes. Like,
I mean, it's as big as it's kind of gotten at that point. 'Cause you don't really know all the characters. Like you know the Starks, and you're like, oh, what sweet, people, and then that kid gets thrown out the window.
Yeah. So, how did you feel about the integration of science in this?
I'm as you said, I'm not a big science
nerd.
I'm not a science nerd, so I don't know much about that. I had to ask if the sun could actually amplify radio waves, which Google told us that it does. That's real. So is that something that we do? Like, is that a thing?
So we just watched Constellation. Constellation was very science heavy.
Yeah.
And I feel like the science in that was such difficult to understand science that it at times could be a turnoff for like your average viewer. This also has science in it. Is it at all a turnoff? Like, do you feel like it's too much?
No, like to me, this is like this is like when you're in high school and you go to the planetarium, or younger than that, and you go to the planetarium, you're like, here's this, and you're like, oh, all right, cool, you know, like, yeah. I'm just going to accept this, you know, like, it has, like, pictures, and, like, you see the sun rising, and it's like, okay, like, this is the story that it's telling, you know, yeah. How is that different than, like, fairies, or, you know, dwarves, or trolls, or whatever, you know, like, I'm just accepting it as part of the story. I don't know the reality, or the, you know, truthfulness to it, but I don't think it's too much for the average viewer. Like, for me, who's not a person. And I appreciate the fact that E1&2, am I saying that right? E1?
I think so. I mean,
I'm real bad with pronunciation, but the fact that when she's explaining, like, on the chalkboard to the soldier, that she dumbs it down, because I'm like, cool, that's me. Like, if you could just do that for the whole series, yes. Anytime it's scientific, just, like, draw on the chalkboard and, like, point and dumb it down. It made me understand what was happening without it feeling like it was holding back the story. Like, yeah. There was a character that was like us, you know? Yeah, or at least like me in it. So it worked.
I definitely think that the show has spent less time on the science. Yeah. And so that makes it, I think, a little bit more approachable. It's also not dealing with quantum mechanics, which is like just weird science, like in Constellation. Right. You know, so it's never anything that's like too difficult to understand the basic idea. Like if you try and do a 3-sentence explanation of Schrodinger's cat, you know, from like that was mentioned in Constellation, it's just like that doesn't make sense. That's just right. That's crazy talk. You can easily take the science topics in this, boil it down to like 2 or 3 sentences, and it's like, okay, cool. I definitely can't like math that out, but I get the idea. I do wish they would spend a little bit more time with the science, but I understand how this is probably more appealing to
the average person. And also we're only 2 episodes in, so they might get more scientific. You know, I don't know. They might have to explain other parts of it. You know, yeah. At this point, I think they're trying to like retain viewers and like yes. you know, build it. And so they don't, if they come out the gate with like, you know, let me tell you the distance between this, right. this. Like, people are going to be like, nope, next. You know, there's so many TV shows out there.
Right. I haven't been watching a ton of Netflix, so I don't know if they're doing this with other shows, but the Netflix N logo was different, right?
I don't know. I don't remember.
And I think it's a reference to something in the show.
What was it?
Well, we haven't seen it in the show yet. But normally it's just like the red N on like the black background.
Right.
And there was like a thing that moved.
Interesting.
And I don't think I've seen them screw with the Netflix logo on other show, but other studios have definitely done that. You know, like Warner Brothers has done the thing where they'll, you know, change their logo, you know, if a right. show is like a certain color grade, or if like they want to make it seem like it fits in a certain, so I thought that was kind of interesting.
Yeah.
And I think they're first, and I thought it was an interesting kind of like nod.
So they're invested. They're putting a lot of eggs in this basket.
Also, with like first impressions, I think, you know, one of my favorite things is intros.
Yes.
What are your thoughts?
It doesn't blow me away. Yeah, it doesn't blow me away, but it's like doesn't impact me like it has you. It's funny. Just started watching True Blood again.
Yes, True Blood.
And that was like the first show whose intro like really, to me, just like captured the essence of the show. Like it was just, anyway, that was a side note, but in terms of intros, I think True Blood was probably like the first just
great. And that's that's generally the type of intro that I gravitate towards, is where you have an abstract intro, so you can keep that same intro through all of the seasons, because it's not giving away any specifics of the show.
Right.
But it gives you the vibe and the feel of the show. And I feel like that one gives you the vibe and the feel. It's got great music, great visuals. Yeah. You don't know what's happening in the show, but you understand the feel of it.
Yeah, the fact that the show is about vampires and there's like death in the intro, like,
and religion and interesting, like,
it works.
Yeah.
Interesting. We were also, sorry, this is kind of a ramble, but we were talking about intros, and we watched
Master of the Air, we watched the Pacific,
which incorporates characters
from
which I feel like that's like an early 90s thing. So I remember watching Saved by the Bell, and it was like, here's like a shot of, you know, like them in this episode, in this scene, and so
I ended up loving both intros.
Yes.
But I did also have issues with, in particular, Masters of the Air had moments that you don't see until later that were spoilers. So like there's something that happens and you're like, oh my goodness, will it this way or will it that way? And then you remember the intro and you're like,
oh, we see them again.
We saw that.
Yeah.
But loved it. Like the music was great.
Yes.
And honestly, I ended up loving the visuals, and it brought me back to those moments.
Yes.
That you did see, and it's like, holy crap, I remember what they're going through. And then when you still had those teases, you're like, oh, I'm excited about that moment to come. So,
yes. But we digress.
I did end up joining. Yes,
we digress.
So.
Back to the intro.
Not a fan of the intro. Music is kind of synthy to me, which I'm not. Not that I have an issue with synth, but it at least it sounds like it. Maybe I'm wrong if there's an orchestra that's doing it and they're like a bunch of people. I feel really bad. I'm so sorry if there are real people doing it and I just think it's a synthesizer. It sounds synthy to me, which is fine if you're trying to do synth, but it sounds like they're trying to do an orchestral piece, but it doesn't sound like an orchestra. And I'm just not. I don't know, that the music doesn't hit me. The visuals to me aren't interesting.
Yeah.
We're only 2 episodes in. Spoiler, we've actually watched 4 episodes. We'll get to the other 2 next episode. But the music still hasn't grabbed me, and I've watched the first 2 episodes twice, so I've now heard the song 6 times.
Right.
Not doing it for me.
That's fine.
It's not fun. Do better. Openings are important. I know everybody skips them except for I'm like the only human in the world that doesn't.
Yeah, it's pretty annoying.
Click skip intro, even when I continue to not like.
It's true. It's pretty annoying.
The second scene jumps into like the suicide thing, and I think this gets into like the pace and like the stakes.
Yes.
It takes so much longer. It's not as explicit in the book.
Okay.
Like they reference that there are suicides of scientists, and somebody does mention that it seems like all of science is wrong, but it's not so explicit where it's like you actually see in one of the major particle accelerators where they're giving wonky results and we're being shut down because of it, and then you see the person commit suicide, and so you like explicitly see how this is affecting scientists' life. You see kind of why they're doing this. The stakes aren't quite as obvious in the book. It takes a long time to really get to stuff.
Okay.
I've watched actually 2 kind of like breakdowns of people that have read the book and watched the show, and one of them was very much of like, this is great, I absolutely love it. It's hitting all of the beats that are in the book, and it's doing a good job of fleshing out the characters and like already thinking ahead to what's coming from book 2 and like planting the seeds for it where they weren't planted in this one, and like in book 1 we're already seeing stuff from book 2 in this. And so that person was like, love it. And they even watched the Chinese version, which came out last year.
Okay.
Which I think is like 30 episodes. And yes, and so they had to add stuff in order to do it. And they also removed stuff. It's much more changed. And so he said he loved this one. And then there was another one, a scientist, who has read the books, watched the Chinese version, watched this version, said he liked the Chinese version better. And I think I'm kind of in the camp of like, I haven't seen the Chinese version, so I don't know if they've like hit all the beats or not. It seems like they've maybe made more changes. But even if they like did all the things, I don't feel like it has the same feel. So it's like they might have hit the beats in this Netflix show.
Okay.
But to me, it is like so much has been revealed so quickly that it's kind of a mystery in the book, and you don't know that the stakes are that big, and you don't know what the stakes are. It's just kind of like, I don't know, there's some in this show. I feel like within like 2 or 3 scenes we see a horrible suicide, eyes gouged out. We have no clue that the suicides are like that bad in the book.
Okay.
You know, it could just be like somebody shot themselves, not like they're writing with their blood and gouging out their eyes, you know?
But is that a cultural thing? I feel like Americans thrive on that kind of like murder mystery. Like murder mysteries is a huge thing. Like I like murder mysteries.
But to me that changes like the feel of it. That's like, so the way I feel it in the Netflix show is like, something is wrong with science. It's like, it's clear it's a serious problem. Versus in the book, it's kind of like, I don't know, there's some weird stuff going on with science. You know, so it's kind of like, is it the biggest problem? We're seeing it from like the perspective of the detective who's investigating this. He doesn't understand the science, so like when somebody says like everything in science, he's okay. What does that mean? You know?
Right.
He knows that people are killing themselves and that he needs to investigate it. But it doesn't seem like it's affecting the rest of the world, like non-scientists. Like, why does it matter?
In the book or
in the book?
I don't think it's affecting non-scientists in.
I think everybody sees the stars blink.
So that is true. But outside of that,
doesn't happen in the.
We're seeing the detective's point of view. We're seeing Dr. Verye's point of view. Like we're seeing the Oxford Five's point of view. Like we've seen the path. Like we're seeing a bunch of different storylines, and so to us, it's like very obvious that like something is wrong, right? Yeah. But I don't think the average person when Augie goes to her company, like her company is so excited to like do her whatever she's doing. No one there is like, they're like, hey, at the coffee machine, they're like, hey, did you see the stars blink? Moving on with our day.
I didn't get that.
So to me, it's not impacting the world like you seem to think it is. Like it seems like
that seemed off to me. To me, the show seems like the stakes are huge. Right. And so that conversation was
very super casual. Like, hey, did you see the universe blink? No? You're good? Okay, moving on. What flavor coffee you want? But the detective knows that all of these terrible things are happening and that it's science related. The Oxford Five don't, like, something's wrong with science, but we don't know why, and we don't know these people are all killing themselves for this, and so they don't see the bigger picture. And so it's disjointed. They don't set it up first that the whole world knows. There's different disjointed points that as the viewer, you're seeing all of them. So you're putting them together and being like, oh, this is not good. Probably the detective sees the murders or the suicides or the whatever, but doesn't understand the science aspect. The scientists see the science is wrong, but don't understand all of it. And so they're like seeing different parts of it.
For me, it just felt very different. Like where one is like, the stakes are huge, here's what the stakes are, and the other one is like, things are happening and they're kind of weird, but let's keep going.
Yeah.
You know?
Okay.
What are your thoughts on the game in this?
Well, I'm not a big video gamer, so I didn't relate to how impressed everyone was when they got inside of the game, you know, and they're trying to touch the characters and looking at their own skin and like their clothes. So that didn't resonate with me because I'm not a super big video gamer. But I did think it was interesting that it seems like the settings are different for the different characters.
Yeah.
You know, why are some people in certain locations and some people in different locations, and are they saving the same civilization numbers at the same time? I mean, I assume the quests are the same, or like the goal is the same, you know, to save civilizations or whatever.
Yeah.
And I thought the dehydration method was interesting.
Okay.
She seemed very, like the follower, the little girl.
Follower.
Right?
Yeah.
Didn't want to do it, you know? She was behind the rock and she was like, you know, what about me? And he was like, no, go out there. But if she knew she'd be safe, like, so does the dehydration affect them in a way? Or when they rehydrated everyone later in the pool, like everyone seemed to, or lake or whatever it was, everyone seemed okay.
Yeah.
So I thought that was interesting that she really didn't want to have to do that. Like she wanted to stay with them, but then she was fine. So I thought that was an interesting aspect to saving a civilization. Just like, you know, just make these people like flat versions of themselves and we'll rehydrate them later. But
it's definitely weird, and I think it is so much more clearly weird in a visual medium.
Yeah.
Versus like describing that in a book. You know, I mean it definitely sounds weird, but it would take so many words to describe the way it looked.
Yeah.
In that like short shot of her being dehydrated. That I do think that visual is more impactful, but in this case the book spends more time on it, and I really like it because there's some interesting things that kind of come up with this. So like one part of it was if they don't dehydrate in time, then these cataclysmic things happen so quickly that it will just completely destroy them. So it's extremely important that they're dehydrated and it doesn't really show this, stored properly. So
how does one store one
They-
dehydrated body?
they have storage places for this. Or in the case of the follower is, I think, I don't remember if the follower is like left there or rolled up and brought along. But for the most part, there's storage places for this.
Okay.
And there are some interesting things that come along with that. So once you get into a stable era,
Right.
you want to do as much as you can to proliferate life as quickly as possible. Something that they didn't really show was that once the first people are brought to be rehydrated, they go into the storage area to help get more people, and then all of those people go in to help get more people. And so it's one of those things where it's like the amount of people that are being rehydrated grows exponentially because each group of people helps to get more people.
They're not just chucked in the pool?
It's not just one round of guards that like chucks everybody in the pool.
Got it.
And then there are also other interesting aspects to it. So like some of the people that rehydrate successfully are missing digits or limbs.
Oh.
Because there are other things like rats that might eat parts of the dehydrated people.
Huh.
And so some people come out really fucked up from the whole thing.
Well,
you know, and I don't think they're aware of it when
it's happening
when they're dehydrated.
Yeah.
It's like when they come to.
Yeah.
And I don't remember, but I feel like maybe some people are like too far gone because of things like that. And so they can't be rehydrated.
Oh, that is a dark turn on something that is very easy in the book or in the show.
Yeah.
You know? It's just like, I'll just dehydrate them and call it a day.
So there's more to it. And then the same thing when it's like when things go into a chaotic era, you would obviously need the opposite to happen where half the people need to dehydrate and like help store the other, you know, so it's like
right.
It's a bigger thing than kind of what you see. The other thing that I thought was kind of interesting about on this show, not the books,
okay,
is that the first shot I think of rehydration, you know, when you're seeing that like crumpled body and it focuses a lot on like the hand, looks so alien, and they put that in the trailer. And to me, this is another one of the things that is a bit of a bummer with the show, is that I feel like they've given too much too fast. Whereas like the show, there's a lot of questions and not a lot of answers for a while.
The book,
and
you mean?
The book.
Okay.
The not a lot of questions and not a lot of answers, and things are slowly teased out, and you don't know why you're seeing some things. Like you don't know why you're spending so much time in this game, and what the point is. But you do it, and it's interesting. Versus like this show has shown big stakes right off the bat, gotten right to that like transmission very quickly, and I feel like the trailer teases that it has something to do with aliens because like you see that shot and it looks like an alien.
Okay.
And so like that's an assumption. So right from seeing the trailer, you're like, oh, this has to do with extraterrestrial. It turns out that maybe that is, maybe it isn't. But like.
Got it. Okay. I don't understand. So the people that are like dehydrated, right, are like saved or stored or whatever, and they come back. But when they lose, like when it's a chaotic era, everyone dies, right?
That's the point of dehydrating, is that they
but like
if they're dehydrated in time, then they won't freeze, they won't burn, they won't whatever.
But I feel like we don't see any of I feel like we've seen some of the same characters in multiple games, but we shouldn't have because the chaotic era would have killed them.
We will see, and I feel like the book spends a little bit more time on this. But also the book, I don't think the book really fleshed out characters. Like I don't think there's the whole like follower storyline. There is somebody that has that scene of like, I don't want to be dehydrated, but I don't think we ever really see that person again. It doesn't really, you know.
And also, like, if multiple people are playing this game, are they saving the same civilizations? Because if one fails, does it affect everyone else's game? I guess like in a video game, like everyone would play their own version of the game.
Yeah.
You know? So, I don't know. Just it's an interesting concept. And interesting how she levels up. How Jin levels up.
Right.
You know? It's like, you solved the problem of what is it, science over mysticism.
Yes.
But also the whole civilization was died. But you get to level up because you solved this puzzle that you didn't know needed to be solved.
Yes.
You know? So it's like, oh, cool. Like, did I nail it? Like, I killed everybody, but also, you know, will she see those same characters in the next level?
Yeah. Something you said earlier that I thought was kind of interesting, like at the very beginning, that I thought was kind of interesting. You're not a big gamer.
Right.
And so, like, the realism didn't have an impact on you. Something I think is interesting in two ways is that, like, one, I think this idea is very interesting right now because
in the AI space.
VR and AR, virtual reality, augmented reality, whatever, I think is very interesting because I know that there's been versions around for a while, things like Oculus, Apple finally got in, and that's a big, expensive one. And so I think that's a very big story right now. And I think because we've seen at the high end, like the really expensive end, what can you do with this technology, I think it really paints a huge difference between where we are right now, you know, where we have to have these battery packs and these ports, and they're these big things, and you can see the cameras that are looking at you to be able to track your eye and things like that.
Right.
You know, it's very clear all the different parts, and there are ports and whatever, versus what you see there. And they make the point of, like, there's no ports, there's no...
Right.
They can't see a screen. It's like,
where's the
it's
rest
so
of
thin.
it? Yeah.
It really makes it seem like, how is this technology even possible?
Right. They say that. It's like, where's the rest of it? Like, this is technology way beyond where we're at.
Yeah. You see, like, the hair raise, you know, with, like, the goosebumps from, like, the cold. Very interesting with where we are right now.
Yeah.
Also, not that advanced in the books. It's just like a VR system. I think it's like a whole suit. And it, like, plugs in. And so I don't think that there's this big mystery of, like, I mean, it is odd that it's like a VR thing that only plays one game, and it's kind of a weird game, like a weird sciencey game, but there isn't a big question of how is this even possible?
Right.
You know? Which is another one of those things that makes it, like, doesn't make it too obvious and doesn't try and point at, like, this is a big thing. You know, instead it's like, I don't know, what kind of weird company puts this out? Like, that's weird. But once again, like, it's not like big stakes of like, whoa, we shouldn't have this.
Okay.
But I think maybe for TV, mainstream audiences, if you want to, like, get a bigger group in, I think that's a very interesting choice that potentially has a big impact.
And it's relatable.
Yeah.
Because of the VR stuff. So definitely makes people intrigued about it.
Yes. Let's chat about, and I know this will be mainly me, but chat about science. Because I love science.
Well, we talked a little bit about it earlier.
Okay.
So
I didn't expect you to say anything. I was surprised you started talking.
Well, you said it!
I expected, like, crickets.
Well, you mentioned science earlier, so I pretty much wrote down all my notes. I've already said them, so...
You wrote all the science you knew?
Yeah.
Which is like two sentences here with all of the science you know.
4 bullet
points.
Yeah, I've only got one left.
Triple space. She wants to make sure she can turn in the assignment.
Yeah, 1 page. Yeah, really all I got left about the science thing that we haven't really already discussed was the stars blinking. Okay, and
Interesting, because the first thing I have here is related to that.
I do think that Saul is onto something. Remember when someone asked him about it and he says he thinks it's a deep fake?
Okay, yeah.
Okay. The fact that, like, Augie sees the numbers, right? Other people see the numbers, right? They're not actually in your environment, which means they're like, something somehow is hacking your vision, your brain, like, something like that. And Saul brings up an interesting point where he says, like, the Hubble telescope, like, the satellites, the telescopes didn't pick it up. So that's why he thinks it's a deep fake. So to me, it's like, did they hack everybody to see the stars blink at the same time? Mm-hmm. Because it's not like they can't do that, right? Like, people see countdowns that other people don't see. So maybe that's how they saw it. Because if the telescopes don't pick it up, picture it didn't happen, right? Like, right. And there's no pictures of it happening or not happening. So I thought that was an interesting bit, and I'm kind of in the brain hacking department. Like
Okay.
or vision hacking or whatever it is.
It's interesting because it is completely different in the book
Okay.
and much more sciencey.
Of course it is.
Of course. So the CMB, cosmic microwave background radiation. I don't know why it doesn't have an R. I feel like it should be 4 letters. CMBR.
No.
This.
If anyone here works at CM whatever, where's the R?
So some of the earliest light after the Big Bang, as
Asterisk if you believe.
that light continues to live on, and because everything was in one space, it's been able to spread out in all of space, versus like the light that is released from our sun literally can't travel fast enough to get to certain parts of the universe, so it'll never spread out everywhere. But that initial light from the Big Bang has spread out to everywhere in the universe because the universe was very tiny. And as the universe has expanded, this thing called redshift has happened. It has cooled. It's gone into longer wavelengths, and it's gone from like visible light to microwaves, which are much longer. And in I don't know how long, eventually it'll continue to get longer, and it'll become radio waves. And then we'll have to come up with a whole new acronym because the M won't work anymore. And I'll still be unhappy that it's only 3 letters.
Okay.
Even though I'll be dead. So you can look at any point in the sky using the right kind of looking device that can see microwaves, so not our eyes, and you can see the cosmic microwave background radiation everywhere in the universe. You can see that everywhere. That is what...
Who can see it, though?
Anybody that has a device that can detect microwaves.
Okay.
And so you have to use a device. You can't use your eyes. And so she has to go to a science place where they have satellites looking at that stuff, and they have like readouts of what it's seeing, and the readout blinks. And so
the
it is
readout, like the printed readout?
It's there's
or
like
like the numbers, like make it look like it blinks.
the numbers that are coming out of it, or maybe there's a visual, or maybe there's like the little, like when you get hooked up to a lie detector and it has like the little thing. I don't remember exactly what it is, but basically like whatever it is that they are looking at that's showing what's going on with the CMB, that goes from like showing CMB to not, to showing CMB to not. So the CMB, so there's no normal human that can look up at the sky and be like, what?
Okay.
It's only these type of devices.
Okay.
So it's very different and much more science-y because it gets into that.
Okay.
But that's interesting, and that to me feels like bigger stakes. Like everybody, so it like, or are they hacking everybody's retinas? Like, how is this a thing? So I think it's like more interesting to general. Another bit of science that is mentioned briefly is the Fermi paradox.
Yeah, I don't even know what that is.
Okay, so
we're all gonna learn.
It's the idea of life should be out there. Intelligent life should be out there.
Okay.
Why haven't we seen any signs of it? So to break it down a little bit more, we have more stars in the universe than there are grains of sand on all of the deserts and all of the oceans on the Earth. That's a mind-blowing number, right? Like that's crazy number. And a huge fraction of those...
I want to know who counted that, but just moving on.
That's, I think the calculations that they've done is they've like they've taken samplings of a number of parts of the sky.
I get it.
And counted that and then extrapolated, if the average of that is this, and you do that over the whole sky, you get this. I don't know who counted all the sand in the deserts.
That's what I want to know. Like, whose job is that?
So once again, extrapolation. Somebody had
inch by inch square, and then multiply that by depth, width.
But I think the difference is big enough that any like issues with error are negligible, where like it wouldn't change anything. Anyway, so crazy amount of stars.
Okay.
And a percentage of those would have planets in habitable zones.
Okay.
You take that percentage of how many of those stars would have planets in habitable zones, that number is also just astronomical. And when you look at the fact that the building blocks for life appear naturally in the universe, not just on Earth, appear naturally in the universe, life should have happened elsewhere. Many, not just like one more time, but the idea of like the likelihood of life as a percentage of those planets still ends up being a huge number. So some of them should have gotten to intelligent life. So there should be intelligent life out there. Why haven't we seen it? My first question, and this is just kind of like a personal kind of question, is do you think there's life out there? And or intelligent life out there?
You know, honestly, it's not something I really given a lot of thought. Like,
You've never thought about that?
It's not that I haven't. I mean, like, I saw E.T., you know? But to me, it's like, it doesn't affect me right now. Like, I'm not against it. I'm not, you know, I don't have adamant beliefs one way or the other. Like, it's just, it's something that I will learn when and if in my lifetime it becomes, like, it's just not. It's just, you know, I got enough problems. I can't deal with other planets' problems.
To me, like, life has to be out there, and then the question kind of becomes like, why haven't we seen signs of it? And there are some interesting different theories. Some of it is like maybe some of our assumptions are wrong, and so there isn't as much as we think, and it wouldn't be as advanced as we think yet, and so we wouldn't see the signs of it. One of the kind of the interesting ones that is referenced by the title of the second book, The Dark Forest. So Three Body Problem is the name of the first book, not the series.
Right.
The Dark Forest is the second one. And the Dark Forest is a really interesting theory in which when you live in a dark forest and anything that is a predator is also potentially prey to something else out there, because who knows what else is in the dark forest.
Okay.
The best way of surviving is by not alerting other predators of your existence.
Makes sense.
And so you stay quiet.
Okay.
And so the idea is the reason we haven't seen signs of life is because they're not constantly transmitting their position to everybody out there.
We can't be the dumbest group.
And those ones that have done that have quickly been found and snuffed out by the other predators.
Well, we haven't been snuffed out yet. I mean, one could argue. Look at our...
So, I thought, like...
Interesting.
The Fermi paradox is interesting in and of itself. And there are a couple of other, like, potential hypotheses as to... I think another one of the ones is that there's different levels to civilization. Like, we haven't gotten to space travel yet. And that there is a natural limitation that prevents civilizations from continuing past a certain point, where it's like whether or not when you get so powerful you implode,
right,
or like technologically you just can't
do it,
spread out that far, like something along those, like there is a ceiling that we just don't understand. So there are some other interesting kind of hypotheses as to help explain the Fermi paradox, but it's still an interesting question.
Interesting that you brought up the Lost Forest?
The Black Forest.
The Dark Forest. Someone's forest. In that she receives a message back that says, "Be lucky I got your message first. I'm a pacifist. My people are not, and we will crush you," or whatever, we will whatever. And she sends back that, like, we can't help ourselves, please come,
And it's interesting because she is one of the few people that would have done that because of what she's been through. So it is, I do feel like that's one of the few character things.
Yes.
Where it's like that person, if somebody else was in that position, that wouldn't have happened.
Right.
But because of what she's been through, she's like...
Well, I think that's also built on to dive deeper into the character and the human aspect of it, is that she was just betrayed by that soldier who I think she kind of thought might be her friend, that one that she explained the whole thing to, and she said, "I want to take it to the commander," and he was like, "Yeah, we should totally do that." And then he went behind her back, went to the, whatever, the commander, I don't know what she took credit for it.
Yeah. She's
brought in to verify his work, which then he gets reamed for, which, probably to her is like, you
But,
deserve
like,
that.
she keeps seeing the worst of humanity.
Right. That's what I'm saying. Is like, she watched her father die. She watched her mother, betray her. And then here she makes a friend. First, she's given the book in the camp by somebody who is a friend. Like that. I think he's a reporter, right? Or something. And then it turns out that somehow, she's turned in. She's sent to this camp where she has to live the rest of her life. And then she kind of makes a friend. And then that guy takes credit for what she discovers. So I think a humanity component, like you're saying, is part of the reason why she's like, you know what? This place is the worst. Like, please, you can't get worse than this.
Right. Right.
And she sees the person who killed her father and asks for, like, her to repent.
Oh, yeah.
And the girl is still like, nope, I would do it again. So...
Who will repent for me?
Right.
You get what you deserve, but what do I get? Yeah. One last sciencey thing, which is the name of the first book, the name of the television series,
the three body problem. Okay.
This idea that when you have a system of like two gravitational bodies interacting with each other, we can calculate that. When you have three gravitational bodies, which all bodies are have gravity.
Okay.
When you have three interacting with each other, it gets crazy.
Why?
It gets.
I don't know.
So, you can describe every interaction of two bodies as the slice of a cone. So if you have a cone, like an ice cream cone, obviously not like rounded top cone, but like that conical shape.
Yes.
You can describe every interaction of one of like the movement of one of those bodies as a slice of that cone. So the simplest slice is when you have a cone going this way and you slice parallel to the ground and you have a perfect circle.
Okay.
So that's one of the potential things. You can have an oval, which is when you like slice diagonally. And then you can have, if you have like an infinite cone, so it continues to go up, and the correct angle of slicing, you can have where it's round at the bottom and then it just continues to go up and it never comes back. So like those bodies would eventually, one of them met up, started to turn, and then just slingshotted off and they went their separate ways. So it's very simple how to describe.
Was that simple?
There's three shapes.
Okay.
It's a circle.
Oval,
thank you. And a parabola.
Okay.
That's it. Those are the three shapes. There may be like different angles to them, but those are the three shapes.
Okay. Visual learner. This is
the shapes that come out of three bodies interacting with each other are crazy. You have these like...
The triangles, right?
No, it's not. No. They like... Sometimes two of them will be playing a little bit more than the other one. The other one's kind of out in the booties, but still comes back. No, not the shape of one. If you look at the movement of just one of those within that three body thing, they'll do like one of them is doing crazy loop-de-loops and then suddenly gets grabbed by another one. And like, so it's like going loop-de-loops in like a circle this way, loop-de-loops this way, and then gets grabbed by this one's gravity. And suddenly stops loop-de-looing and just goes this way. And then maybe it circles this one, and then maybe it gets pulled into like figure eights between the two.
Okay.
And they're constantly changing, and they're...
that...
It's crazy.
Okay. Makes a little bit more sense.
Tough without visuals.
Yeah. I'm a visual.
I should have come prepared.
You should have come prepared. How did you not know I was going to ask?
So, the show seems... I'm getting a little bit ahead, and I don't think this is a spoiler. Skip had like a minute if I think this is like very minor. The show presents us as an unsolvable problem, and I think the book actually does too.
Okay.
And that is kind of right and kind of wrong. There have been solutions discovered to the three-body problem. Because just like the solutions to the two-body problem, where it's like, some of them are just circles, some of them are ovals, some of them are parabolas. Okay. Depending on the starting states, some of them have solutions that we can perfectly predict. And we have discovered a number of these. And so there are, if the starting conditions are perfect, there are some of these 3-body solutions available. Also, and while it's not perfect, there are ways that we can math this. The best way in this case, like with one of the ways is if one of the bodies isn't a big enough of a contributor, you can just take it out of the equation and just treat it like a 2-body problem solution. Obviously, that's not the case here. They're all big enough that they're all contributing.
And we're going to get there eventually.
Yes.
So don't go too far into this.
No, but this is getting into, like, you can, if you, instead of trying to perfectly math the 3-body problem at every, like, the entire perfect thing in a complex system, not possible. But if you do a bunch of slices, and each time you have, like, a freeze frame, you treat it as a 2-body problem and look at how they interact and then math it that way, and then do, like, the next, not necessarily, like, the exact next instant, but, like, a moment after that. We have a 3-body problem we're dealing with right now that we have math to the point where if the eclipse, if you want to see the eclipse, we can tell you the exact strip you need to be in, and based off of where you are on that strip, the exact time it's going to happen. That's a 3-body problem, and we've mathed that out using some of these tricks.
Okay.
You know, so it's like...
See, I need examples like that. That resonates, but... Anyway.
It's tough, but you can do it. Okay. Interesting observations.
Okay. So, in the very beginning, in the apartment of Sadiq, the first scientist that you kind of see that has committed suicide, and you see the countdown on the wall written in blood. At the very end of it, the time runs out, and it says, "I still see it." So that was kind of like what happens when the clock runs out, and he was saying, "I still see it." So what at that point caused him, like, did he go mad? Like, what caused him to gouge his eyes out? Was it just like, I'm tired of, like, I can't keep seeing this timer that has stopped running?
Yeah.
You know? So I just thought that was interesting because there's the mystery girl on the stairs that lights Augie's cigarette, right? We don't know who she is.
Yeah.
And she says, you don't want it to run out.
Yeah.
But his ran out. So, like, what happens at that point? That was interesting because Augie is terrified of it running out. And Augie's given a way of how to stop it. Maybe these other people aren't visited by this mystery woman.
And Clarence confirms that other people have seen this. They stopped their work. And so they stopped seeing it, or they took their life. That is interesting.
Yeah.
This is another one of the, for me, big differences. Okay, so seeing that countdown, scene 2, written in blood, guy's eyes gouged out, it is visceral. You know, like you react right away. And then when we see it start to happen with Augie, at first it's like something blurry, and then she sees the countdown in her eyes. In the books, it's the character doesn't quite exist in the show. They've split it between, I think, like 4 of the characters, and also combined it with characters that will be coming up in book 2. Okay. So they're setting themselves up as like, let's go ahead and introduce these characters now, split up some of the work, and also flesh them out so it's not just like this one character that doesn't have a lot of backstory. Okay. So that's been, the work of that has been kind of split up. So the one main character that we follow in the book, other than E1&2, which definitely has a big impact in the book, that character, I don't remember why he takes a picture, but he takes a picture and develops it, and there's numbers on the picture. Oh. And it's like, that's weird. So he takes another picture of something else. So it's not in his eyes. He has to correct. It's only in the image. And he has to go develop it. Okay. And it shows up there. And so he starts taking pictures of other... So it's like much slower and more teased out versus like... And so it's like, is there something wrong with the camera? Because you can imagine that. Like, that's... I don't know. There's some weird whatever. And so he ends up going to like a neighbor's house to borrow a different camera to see if there's something wrong with his camera. Okay. And he also ends up seeing the pictures on that camera. Then he starts seeing it. Okay. From his eyes. But it's like... it takes there's this interesting scene of like it's easier to think that there's something wrong with like something we built,
right,
and that it's a mistake, not
right.
like, you know. And then when it's another camera, it's like this is getting weird, and then when it's his eyes, then it's now
not great.
You've escalated, now but you still don't. At this point, you don't know that the scientists that have committed suicide have also seen this countdown. So there's no correlation yet in the book that this is related to a much bigger problem, even though you do know that scientists are killing themselves, and that's weird.
Because I was saying, Augie doesn't know that other people have seen this. So, like, the characters, to them, it's like...
But we, the audience, in the book, don't know that there's a correlation, and we certainly don't know that it's at the level where somebody's that desperate that they're, like, gouging out their eyes to stop seeing it.
Right.
Like,
also about the countdown, I thought it was interesting that she didn't see it until Jin went to take the phone call that Dr. Yi had taken her own life. So, do they not have simultaneous countdowns? Because Jin left, took the phone call, and that's when she looks at the TV because the guy's singing karaoke. Or maybe I'm wrong. Maybe she sees it when they're singing karaoke, but she doesn't see like the number. She just sees like the interference. But I don't think she sees the actual numbers until after it's confirmed, or at least after Jin has left to take the phone call.
That's an interesting and good catch.
So, you know, does it only target one person at a time?
Yeah. Who knows?
And because it only gave her just shy of 5 days.
Right.
You know? So it's like, what can you do in 4 days, 9 hours, 17 minutes, and by the time it's like 42 seconds by the time it comes into focus, you know? It's like, especially when she doesn't know what it means. It's not until later that she finds out, like, how she can stop it. But meanwhile, she's just watching this countdown, you know, goes to a neurologist, you know, she doesn't know what it means. So, I thought that was interesting. The other thing I felt was interesting, the religious undertones. Okay. Right? Like in the past, they're talking about the existence of God. And like that is like the ultimate, you know, crime. Yeah. You know? When they bring out her dad, who's a physicist, right? And so, you know, they're talking about like the different theories, and then someone says, well, that leaves room for God. Yeah. You know, and he says, I don't have evidence either way. And like that's like enraging to them. Yeah. You know? And then
I'm really sorry if I'm wrong about this. I think during that time the emperors were themselves God.
The gods. And that makes sense. It just
and so anything that leaves wiggle room for something else, which is interesting because it's like he didn't say like the science points at a god. Instead it's just like we can't say yes or no. Right. And so if it's not in service to their beliefs, then it is against their beliefs. Right. Especially since this stuff is coming from the West, you know? Right. Like these are ideas from Einstein and from these others, you know, that are like evil people that have created the atomic bomb and, you know.
They mentioned that, the bomb.
Yeah.
But then in present time, Dr. Yi, who asks what's left if not God. So, you know, and then her mother later is like, why would she say that? We're a science household, not a religious household. So it's like, where are these religious undertones coming from? Yeah. The mystery woman on the stairs says to Augie, the Lord has a better way. So just a lot of like religious-y things in a very scientific environment, which I just thought was interesting. Not that it means one thing or another or whatever, but just an interesting part of that. And
if I may, just while you're talking about the woman on the stairs.
Yes.
My one, I'm going to talk more about her later when we talk about some of the people that know some things. Okay. But I did have one thing that I had an issue with. Okay. You know, when she was on the stairs with Augie's lighter isn't working, and so she offers her. And then later when Augie is getting questioned by Clarence, which I really struggle with saying Clarence because his character name is Dashi. I'm probably pronouncing it wrong in the book. And of all of the characters, I think he is the one. All the others I feel like are really well fleshed out. And I actually prefer his representation in the book
Okay.
They kind of reference the fact that isn't necessarily always following the rules. Like, his boss says the thing, like, you've been fired from all these other jobs.
Right.
Like, this is kind of the last one. He tries to smoke in places he shouldn't smoke.
Right.
But you don't, at least not yet, you haven't seen how off-putting he can be to other people, in how sometimes kind of inappropriate he can be in his, like, questioning or methods, or I don't feel like you've quite seen that, and I really like that about his character. I felt like that one, not that you necessarily understand his backstory, so maybe he's not like the most well fleshed out, but I do think he's much more interesting in the book to me.
Got it. But about the lady on the stairs.
Anyway, so thank you for bringing me back.
Reeling you back in.
My life. I was going out there.
This is my life.
I had my spelunking helmet, and I was like going out there, and you're like,
this is ADD, friends.
Get back. He says, like, we have footage of you, and there was no woman there. And she's like, I'm not crazy. I saw a woman. And he's like, yeah, I know. Your lighter doesn't work. Let me show you this footage where your thing suddenly... She still has this broken lighter, and she's still trying to light...
She got other things on her mind, okay?
Like,
she's busy down in her
how many cigarettes has she tried to light with this that she's still carrying this around, and every time she's like, oh, still doesn't work.
She didn't put it on her grocery list. She forgot.
Like, every single time does she have to find somebody and ask them for... And nobody's been like, take my light. Keep it.
Keep it.
Nobody. Like, the fact that we saw it again, and it was like this like moment of like, oh, he's clever, because... Dashi he may not understand science, or Clarence, I'm sorry, Clarence. He may not understand science, but he is sharp. And so that's how they show it in the show, and it's like, I don't buy that one.
Okay. Well, I don't know about all that.
Thanks for reeling me back.
Yeah, no problem. What I was going to say was, so Augie's told, like, shut down your study or this countdown's going to end, and bad things, right? You don't want the countdown to run out.
Yes.
When Dr. Yi is talking to Saul, she says, like, they shut us down. She's not shutting it down to save herself. And he says, we have until lights are on until midnight. So I wonder, why did she kill herself? Why her? Why did she take her own life? Did she have a countdown? What could she have done differently? Or is it just that her life's work has now been... it's not working, and so maybe that's it. That was interesting that Augie is given, like, this is how you can fix it, shut down your work. And they talked about the other side. Clarence tells Augie other people have had to shut down their work. But it doesn't seem like Dr. Yi had that option. Somewhat, they shut it down, but she still decided to do that. So I thought that was interesting.
So, the Oxford Five.
The Oxford Five. Interesting, they already have a name for them. Like, who are they? Because prior to Dr. Yi's suicide, they're just people who studied under her at some point, right? Like, a couple of them have left and done different things. Like,
right.
Jack Rooney has his little snack business, you know? And so they all do different things. So they're not like a group of science, you know, like, they're not like a tight-knit community. They're a group of friends. So for there to already be a name for the Oxford Five is strange.
Right. Like, it definitely seems like there should be more people on Clarence's board. Yeah. That it turns out aren't important.
Correct.
And it should be like the Oxford 10 or something like that, and then it turns out that only 5 of them are important.
Right, like these 5 are actually intimately connected. Versus, she's a professor, so she's had it. Like, these were her students at one point, but I'm assuming she's had hundreds, if not thousands, of students at some point that are probably at least some of them still in the industry. So interesting that they're like this group.
Yeah, and I think that was also kind of I don't necessarily want to say it's smart, because I think you can easily poke that hole in it, but it was a nice visual way of being able to use the
string,
the pinboard and the string to be able to let you know, hey, these are important characters you should be paying attention to. They're connected. These are the names. These are the connections. So I think that was an interesting way to do that, but I also think that if you look at it for a moment, it's like, Yeah.
Because they're not, like, it really only affects Augie. So what do the other 4 have to do with it? Yeah. Right? Like, it affects one of them who's went off and did something. She's got her own business. Like, she's creating something. So maybe that's what's important, not her relationship to Dr. Yi, you know?
Right.
So that's a little bit like, I don't know, like, okay. So obviously the focus is on these 5, right? Like maybe stuff will happen to the others, but really it's just Augie in these first 2 episodes. So,
but they are well fleshed out. Every one of them has interesting dynamics. Everyone has their own interesting characteristics and then different dynamics with each other.
Yeah.
It is interesting seeing that play out. As I said before, most of those characters are either one character in book 1 or they're bringing in other characters from book 2 and giving them some of the stuff that like the character from book 1 did. So that's been split up, that work, and it's been fleshed out a lot more. And I do think that that works well for TV.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, I'm invested in their relationships, you know?
Yes.
Like, the fact that Will has always really loved Jin but never said anything, and now she has a new boyfriend, and, you know, the difference between Augie and Sao. Like, you know, they've got something going on. So, like, the relationships make them more real, more human, and more relatable, which I think helps offset, like, the sciencey aspect of a show for the average viewer.
Right. And it's interesting that, like, early on, Dr. Yi says to Saul, if anybody can figure it out, it's you. But you can easily forget that because after that, a lot of the other characters are kind of writing him off as, like, just...
He's high all the time.
He's not there for them.
Correct.
He reaches out when he wants to, but he doesn't pick up when they reach out.
Right. So he's like you know, to them, he's not reliable. He's not there, you know.
Yeah.
And he even says, like, when she says, when they're watching the blinking universe, and she's like, you know Morse code? And he's like, I know a lot of things, you know?
Yeah. You really see it in that scene because she brings him along as, like, I need a science, and not just an observer, a science observer.
Yes.
Like, somebody with that eye. And she sets him up with that, and his first thought is like, they're gonna like, yes, exactly.
We're going to a dark place.
Yes, and he came there high, and he's like, he's like talking about other things, and she has to like tell him to focus, and it's like, so you really see that dynamic.
Yeah.
I do like those relationships. I do think that is a part that I have enjoyed seeing is those relationships fleshed out, the characters being a little bit more fully formed. I don't necessarily like it at the expense of losing some of the science.
Okay.
I think there's a way that this isn't the craziest science. I think you could do it in a way that is interesting.
I think this is interesting, but...
Well, like, you could do more of that science.
Yeah.
And still not have it be one of those things where it's like, oh my god, this is too much.
I might do that. Like, we don't know what happens in the game, like... Science over mysticism, so what does that mean? Like, there might be more science in the video game in the future. Like, you know, I don't know.
I'm curious. I haven't heard this, but I wonder if anybody thinks that this is whitewashing, because like I said, most of this in at least the first book takes place like in China, Chinese characters, and that's been split up among all of these, you know, UK people. Some of them aren't, you know, Chinese. It's an interesting choice, and in this case, I don't think it's whitewashing, because they still do have a diverse cast. It's not like it's just literally whitewashing. I think they moved it out of China to make it, some parts of it out of China, to make it a little bit more accessible to English-speaking audiences.
But I mean, they have like Dark, which is like,
I know
they do. Netflix actually has a pretty decent foreign film or foreign show.
Yeah.
So there really wasn't a reason. Like, they could have used, even if it's not
I think
set in China, they could have used Chinese actors and actresses.
I think that's because of the creators. I don't think that, like, I don't know if they penned any of the episodes, but like, I don't think that they would have felt comfortable being the showrunners approving or asking for edits on scripts that they don't understand the language issue.
But they're taking a book that's written in, like, they're taking
I
a
assume
translation.
they've read the translation.
But that's a translation, you know.
But like, you can't Google you can't like.
Yeah, that's
so I would have actually preferred to go the like stick with it route and have it be China. Like, I've always enjoyed when you can see other cultures.
Yeah.
I think we're watching Shogun right now,
Yes.
and it is wild seeing, this older Japanese culture.
Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah.
So I would love to see
I
that.
feel like I've learned more from Shogun about the culture than I did in my history class.
Right, yeah.
Like,
So I personally, I would prefer, but I do get that, like, these showrunners, like, I don't think that they can do something that's not in their language, and they wouldn't be able to do it justice.
Well,
I think they wanted to.
But they could have consulted with people. Like, they could have.
Maybe.
There are people, and this is not just for this show, but like across the board. Like, you can consult with people from those countries, from that culture, and help.
But it also, like, it disadvantages them in a number of other ways. Like when it comes to, like, casting, like, they don't know the, like, solely Chinese speaking people. So it's like they already had people from Game of Thrones that I'm sure that they were like, this person would be perfect for this.
Right.
Like, they have an eye for it versus, like, so I don't think that they could do the, like, true adapt, like,
right.
But they wanted to do it. They want to make money.
But I think that's ultimately what comes down. It was easier because they knew people that they thought fit these roles instead of having to take the time, consult with, other groups that have this.
Yeah.
But it is what it is. I think it would have been, if they had done it in Chinese and been subtitled, they may have lost viewers because, it's like reading while watching TV, which a lot of people watch TV and don't read, so.
And then, like, similar to that, and I haven't heard anybody say this, but I hear people say this with other adaptions where they change genders, like, is this gender bent? Because a bunch of what Augie is going through is what the main character goes through, that is a man in the book. And so are they doing that? But I don't think it's that they're making that many crazy changes. It's more of like they've brought in characters early and then split up the workload of, like, what that other character was doing between all of these others, and allowing that to bring in, which means that they have an eye for the long game. Like, their goal is to do all of the series. I don't know whether or not Netflix will or has greenlit any of the other ones.
Yeah. But
that definitely seems like their goal, because it looks like they are looking ahead.
Yeah.
By, like, setting that up.
Right.
And I don't have any issues with that. Like, as long
as it's done well.
Yes.
As long as it's done well.
Yes. It shouldn't be done for the sake of doing that.
Right.
But if that is the right person, I don't care.
Okay.
I don't care. So last, I think some of the people that know what's going on, and we've already talked about E1&2, who's one of the big ones.
Yes.
And we've talked about the past a little bit, but, like, she's definitely one of them. One thing that I thought was interesting, like, after you see what she knows and then think back to, like, the opening, and I'm curious on your thoughts on this. So her daughter is the one that we see commit suicide.
Correct.
And then we find out later that she definitely has some inside information on we don't know how much, but...
What do you mean when you see that she has inside information?
She's the person that gets the transmission.
Yes.
She's the person that responds to the transmission. And it's hard not to believe that there is a connection.
She doesn't play it that way.
And she certainly isn't being forthright.
I was going to say, she is playing the grieving mom. Like, she's not forthcoming about what she did or what has happened, how it's related to her.
Do you think if there is a connection, and maybe I know this from the books, maybe I don't, if there is a connection, do you think she knows it? And if so, do you think it's
hard to tell what the general public knows, right? Like, she just knows that her daughter committed suicide. Well, at least we think that she knows. Her daughter committed suicide. Her daughter was a scientist, and her daughter played this video game.
Yes.
We don't know what kind of relationship they had.
Yeah.
Like, was her daughter sharing like what she was doing in this video game, where the video game came from, what's happening, what her science looks like. Like, we don't know. They don't explain like the dynamic between the mother-daughter duo. So, right now the mom seems very much like, you can tell she's a scientist, right? Initially you say that because she says this is a science household. Yeah. Then you see her in the picture of her in front of the satellite, so you connect her to the girl that we've been seeing in the past. You're like, okay, so this is the same character, and now she's grown up, so she obviously got out of that because she was supposed to live in that camp for the rest of her life. So she obviously got out, had a child with somebody. So we don't know who the father is. Like, is it someone, part of this? And then, does she remember? Like how long ago was that she sent that transmission, Yeah. Did she get a response? Does she know if there's a response? Does she think it's weird that the universe is blinking? We just don't know a lot about the mom. Yeah. The mom as a mom at this point, right? Okay. Yeah. She's kind of there. We see her at the funeral. She's very subdued. She's sitting quietly in the front row. People are coming up to her. They're expressing their sympathies. Yeah. But she's not saying anything. She's not like, we just don't know at this point. Right. Kind of where she is. But she obviously has knowledge that like there are people out there, like this is real, but she's keeping it close to her chest. Like, she's not. Right. No one's calling her doctor, whatever.
The person at the stairs.
The mystery woman at the stairs, yes.
Mystery woman at the stairs. Thoughts on her?
I don't have a lot of thoughts on her.
She's
just kind of stranger, Who is she? What is she doing there? How is she scrubbing herself? Who is scrubbing her from the videos?
How does she know that?
How does she know?
Midnight.
The stars will blink. And how does she?
1, stop doing your work. 2, at midnight, just in case you think that I'm just being crazy, here's my proof. At midnight. Right. And then she just happens to be in the same graveyard with Clarence. Right. Who's in this investigation, lying.
So she's at her dad's house, her dad's grave. But that's obviously, they show a fan to it. It's a 4-year-old girl.
I think that was a lie, that she's at her dad's grave. I don't think...
We know that, because you can see the grave.
I don't think the rest was a lie about her dad.
She brings coconut cake to her dad's...
That her dad died, and how'd he die? Well, first she called it like a sad accident or something like that.
He committed suicide, didn't he?
Was it
Well, I guess we don't know that. He shot himself. He was shot in the head.
She said died of gunshot.
Gunshot to the head.
And he was like, oh, I'm sorry. And she's like, no, it's a good, quick way to go. Yeah. To me, that's like, she pulled the trigger.
Yeah. That's interesting.
She, like, there was something, like, she was very casual about that part. Instead of being like, oh, that, you know what? It is sad, but it's been a long time, so I've had time. And that's at least it's a fast way to go. Yes. She was a little... Yes.
She's also the person in the game that tries to Jack Rooney, right? Isn't that her?
I'm not 100% sure, but I
think that looks like her. Yeah. It looks like her. I don't know. And it kind of sounds like her, but I don't know if that's the same character. I didn't look it up. But I don't know. She's one interesting. She's one interesting. Yeah. I did have another thought when we were talking about the past. We're talking about characters who know.
Yes.
I find it suspect, and maybe this is just an oversight, that no one notices that she moves the satellite to aim at the sun. No one notices this, and then a response comes in, and she happens to be the only one who reads the paper and sees that, and then she sends a little message back. No one notices. I don't know about all that. So, do more people know? And didn't say anything. Don't know.
Clarence drew a line between her and Mike Evans.
Clarence drew a line between her and Mike Evans.
So it's not explicitly been said that he knows, but where Mike Evans was
also, yes.
He was there
saving the bird.
And he happened to be there, and he is one of the people that they are looking at.
Right.
And so
because he is involved in an energy corp and a sciencey thing.
So he put that kind of line there. That's not necessarily explicit or proven.
Right.
But it certainly seems like he...
And he flies in for the funeral.
flies in for the funeral.
For the daughter, looks at mom. I don't think they really said anything. And then he flies away in this helicopter.
Yes.
So, interesting.
Yes. But with that, I think our journey has come to an end. Thank you so much for joining us today. Next week, we will be doing episodes 3 and 4 of Three Body Problem. At that point, Mark should be back for the episode after that. So stay tuned. Thank you so much for joining. See you next time.